Hey guys, remember me? I used to make videos and then I stopped for like 2 months. But I've got something exciting to talk about today. Unless you live under a rock, or I guess you could be from some other country. The Supreme Court issued its final 3 opinions of its session today. This morning at 10 a.m. I was glued to my phone despite being in a meeting. Reason why that's important. The 2 of the cases were dealing with marriage equality. And let's just say things went pretty well for us. So you may have heard the outcome, but it's not entirely clear what exactly their rulings mean. So I'm going to try and clear that up for you a little bit. You can check out my other video that I did previously on these 2 cases a few months ago. So the first case was United States versus Windsor. This case challenged the Defense of Marriage Act, which was passed back in the 90s under Bill Clinton's administration. The act has 2 parts. Or 2 real parts. The first part states that if a state doesn't wish to, it can't be forced to acknowledge a same-sex marriage from another state. If I were to get legally married here in New York to a man, if I went to a state like Pennsylvania that doesn't allow gay marriage, they would not be required to honor my marriage and recognize it in that state. The second part is what was challenged by the Supreme Court case. And that part stated that on a federal level, in any place in the federal government where it mentioned the term marriage, marriage was to be defined as between a man and a woman. And so obviously this caused a lot of problems. This is where all of the numbers you hear cited about the 1,000+ specific benefits and tax regulations and visitation rights and all these things that were being denied to same-sex couples on a federal level because we couldn't be recognized by this law. So the Supreme Court came back and ruled that that provision, that second part, was in fact unconstitutional on the Equal Protection Clause. It stated that we are all protected equally under this country and under the laws and under the Constitution. So what does that mean? Basically, the government is going to have to take a look through everywhere in their laws and in their policies and basically just make it all open for same-sex couples. So if you live in a state like mine, where the state acknowledges same-sex marriage, then you actually, as far as I can tell, are completely the same in both the state and federal level as a heterosexual married couple. So that's pretty awesome. It's like amazing to me. The second case was Hollingsworth versus Perry, and this one dealt with Proposition 8 in California. Proposition 8 basically was a voter-passed referendum that defined marriage as between one man and one woman. Basically prevented same-sex marriages in that state where they were previously made legal. This case is slightly different and slightly more confusing. See, basically what happened was the executive branch in California decided that they weren't going to try and enforce this law. They didn't like it, they didn't support it, so they just weren't going to enforce it. The problem is it's the executive branch's job to enforce the laws. So what happens when the executive branch doesn't want to enforce a law? Well, you see, they tried, a private group tried to take this to the courts on behalf of the state. This group was behind the passage of Proposition 8, and so they had a lot of vested time and money into this law. The courts in California ruled that they had standing and that they could represent the state, and then found that Proposition 8 was unconstitutional. This big confusing gray mess eventually was heard by the Supreme Court, and they came back and ruled that in fact this private group that got together to support Proposition 8 did not have the legal standing to do that. So what ended up happening is that they ended up throwing it out. They rejected it, they sent it back, and by doing that they essentially put it back to the district court in California, which had previously found that Proposition 8 was unconstitutional. There was a question immediately after as to whether or not this would apply to the whole state of California or only those counties under that district. However, the governor of California publicly stated earlier today, very shortly after the ruling came out, that he in fact interprets it to mean the entire state of California. So what does that mean? That means that as soon as 25 days, which is the typical waiting period after a Supreme Court issues its ruling, same-sex marriages resume in California. So overall, today was an amazing win for equality and for rights in this country, which is a rarity, especially considering we're facing such a troubling time in terms of these NSA leaks and Edward Snowden and all these things. So it's really great news to hear. The Supreme Court didn't rule on the constitutionality of Proposition 8, so therefore the ruling only affects California. It doesn't affect the other states within that district. It doesn't affect the entire country. It's just California. However, the DOMA, the United States versus Windsor, that is on the federal level, so federally across the board. So basically now, if you are legally married in your state, in a state, you are acknowledged under the federal government. So what do you think about this? I mean, the opinions in this country have shifted amazingly over the last few years, the last decade, but especially recently, the momentum has just been rolling and rolling. You know, when do you think we'll actually see complete equality? And one other interesting thing is that while the United States lags behind a lot of other countries in a lot of disconcerting ways, we are still really a trendsetter, and so I'm really curious to see if these new rulings will have a ripple effect. For example, Australia has actually been really repressive lately, and Russia just passed a crazy law that basically states that it's illegal to teach children that gay people exist. Like, it is the most mind-boggling thing. I just can't. But yeah, let me know what you think. Are you excited? Did you throw a party in the street? Did you go crazy? Not gonna lie, I was in a meeting and I had my phone up with a live blog, and when the results came in, like, it was really difficult to pay attention to the meeting. My mind was so many other places. But thanks for watching. Remember when we used to do this, when I used to talk to the camera and then put it on YouTube and you would watch it? I like that. I like those days. Maybe we should go back to that. Maybe I should make some more videos. But until next time, I'm Brian. Thanks for watching. Bye. I might have to sit here all night long sticking condoms up my nose. Just the thought of it. One of my biggest pet peeves is when a guy you think is hot makes a video on YouTube without his shirt on and all you see is his shoulders and he doesn't show anything else. It drives me crazy. Like, stand up, come on, show off some skin.